Recent polling found that much of America would be more comfortable with a nuclear power plant in their town than a data center. In one state, residential electricity prices have climbed nearly 68% since 2019. And yesterday, for the first time anywhere in this country, a governor told the artificial intelligence industry to stop building. This is KnowFlo Daily. Good morning. It's Thursday, July 16th. Here's what's on the front page. China's economy grew 4.3% in the April to June quarter compared with a year earlier, down from 5% in the first quarter. That's the slowest showing in over 3 years, and short of what economists expected, which is strange because exports are booming. Shipments were up 27% in June, driven by chips, batteries, cars, and other high-tech products tied to the global AI buildout. China's June trade surplus was $125.6 billion, the second largest on record. The problem is at home. Retail sales of consumer goods grew 1.3% in the first half of the year and just 1% in June. They actually fell in May, the first drop since the end of the COVID lockdowns. Families have pulled back, squeezed by a long property crisis and worries about jobs and wages. Beijing set a growth target of 4.5% to 5% this year, the lowest in decades, and it is currently missing it. Some economists say the model has gone lopsided. State money pours into AI, chips, and robotics, while everything else languishes. The United States and Iran traded strikes for a fifth straight day on Wednesday, and the fight widened. Central Command ran 2 rounds of strikes, including a 90-minute attack on coastal defenses and cruise missile sites on Greater Tunb Island, right at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. The goal is to blunt Iran's ability to hit commercial ships in a waterway that carried about a fifth of the world's oil and gas shipments before the war. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps says it answered by striking American military targets in 3 other countries: Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait. Jordan's military says it shot down 3 Iranian missiles, and Kuwaiti and Bahraini forces say they intercepted attacks. No immediate reports of damage or casualties. Iran also threatened to shut off more of the region's energy exports, warning the United States to prepare for the closure of every other export corridor. The blockade on Iranian ports went back up Tuesday, after being lifted last month. The conflict is in its 5th month, the interim ceasefire has collapsed, and diplomacy has stalled. The president said at the Army War College that Iran's leaders want to settle, then added that the United States would decide whether to settle or finish them off. In Kyiv, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen signed a letter of intent with Ukraine to start building weapons together. Joint drone and anti-drone production by the end of this year. Joint anti-ballistic missile production by 2028. She called it a new EU-Ukraine defense industrial partnership, and the pitch is a straight trade. Ukraine has battle-tested knowledge Europe does not have. Europe has industrial scale and safe production sites Ukraine does not have. Ukraine is currently turning out 10 million drones a year, and Zelensky wants to double that. 6 billion euros of a 90 billion euro EU loan is going toward that ramp up. It was von der Leyen's 11th visit since the invasion began. Note the shift. For 4 years, Europe has been supplying Ukraine. This is Europe manufacturing with Ukraine on a timeline that runs to 2028. That is a statement about how long Europe thinks this lasts. And at the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced Wednesday that every service member 30 and older will be required to undergo annual testosterone deficiency screening, folded into their existing periodic health assessments. Troops under 30 can volunteer for it. He announced it in a video posted to X, captioned the High T Department of War. If low testosterone turns up, troops will be offered voluntary replacement therapy. Hegseth said this is not about artificial enhancement, but about restoring and optimizing natural capabilities. The questions started immediately. Georgetown University professor Adrienne Few Berman called the policy non-evidence-based and said it could cause harm. The Defense Department declined to say whether there would be estrogen screenings for female service members or any repercussions for troops who declined treatment. It referred reporters to the video. But we begin with a decision that landed on the artificial intelligence industry yesterday like a dropped anvil. For the first time, a state has simply said no. New York Governor Kathy Hochul signed an executive order Tuesday, placing a 1-year moratorium on construction of large-scale AI data centers. Large-scale meaning any facility drawing 50 megawatts or more. It is the first statewide ban of its kind in the country. Hochul says the state needs time to write rules, protecting the electrical grid, natural resources, and local communities. Her list of concerns is the list you've been hearing for 2 years. These centers consume enormous amounts of power. They drive up costs for ratepayers. They require millions of gallons of water, and they can increase carbon emissions. Here's the number underneath all of it. New York's average residential electricity price has climbed nearly 68% since 2019. That is not an abstraction about the grid. That is a bill arriving at a kitchen table. And the pause is not the whole order. Hochul called on lawmakers to repeal the sales tax exemptions data centers currently enjoy. And she said the state will require data centers to either produce their own power or pay a premium to use New York's electric grid. Sit with that second part, because it is the more consequential one. The The tax break disappears, and the cheap grid access disappears. A moratorium expires in a year. A pricing structure does not. The reaction split about how you'd expect, but not entirely along the lines you'd expect. Environmental groups and some lawmakers praised it, including Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Senator Bernie Sanders pointed out that his own moratorium bill was called radical just months ago, and Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania posted, simply, that China wins. The market noticed. Shares of Digital Realty Trust, Vertiv Holdings, and Equinix fell as much as 2% early Tuesday. Now, the polling. The Washington Post reports that much of America would be more comfortable with a nuclear power plant in their town than a data center. Think about what it took to get there. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima, 40 years of documentaries. And a windowless building full of servers has managed to poll worse than all of it, because the objection isn't really the building. A power plant powers your town. A data center, as far as most residents can tell, powers somebody else's chatbot and raises your rates, which is the actual significance of this order. Not that New York paused for 12 months. It's that resistance to AI infrastructure has found the argument that works, and it isn't about jobs or safety or the machines taking over. It's about the utility bill. That argument travels to every state in the country. Now, the rest of the day's business. Neko Health, the body scanning startup co-founded by Spotify's Daniel Ek and Hjalmar Nilsson, raised $700 million on Wednesday, co-led by Lightspeed Venture Partners and OG Venture Partners. The New York Times reports the company is now worth nearly $7 billion, roughly a fourfold jump since its last raise in January of 2025. What you actually get is a 60-minute, non-invasive, radiation-free full body scan plus blood tests assessing skin health, pre-diabetes risk, blood abnormalities, and risk factors tied to metabolic syndrome, stroke, and heart attack. 8 clinics so far in Sweden and Britain. A scan costs £299 in Britain. Demand is the story. More than 350,000 people have registered or joined the waitlist. Just over 100,000 have actually been scanned. And the company says 3 in 4 returning members whose earlier scans found severe or life-threatening conditions saw that condition improve by their next visit. The investor list tells you what kind of company this is. Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan, Ari Emanuel, Jimmy Iovine, Maria Sharapova, Tim Ferriss. The money is for America. First U.S. clinic opens in New York later this year. And that's where this gets interesting, because a cash pay preventive scan is a different proposition in a country where the alternative is an insurer deciding whether you needed it. Emergent, an Indian AI coding startup, raised $130 million at a $1.5 billion valuation in a round led by Kriegis with Khosla Ventures, SoftBank Vision Fund 2, and Y Combinator all returning. Now hold the timeline in your head. The company was founded 13 months ago. In January, it raised a Series B at a $300 million valuation. 6 months later, it is worth 5 times that. And it is not floating on nothing. Co-founder and chief executive Mukund Jha says the company is at an annual run rate of $120 million in revenue, up 70% in the last 4 months, with more than 200,000 paying customers. Here's the number that matters most. About 70% of its users have never written code before. Emergent is not selling to developers. It's selling to non-technical entrepreneurs and small business owners who want software and have no one to build it. North America is about a third of revenue. Europe is another third. Jha names Replit as the closest rival, alongside Cursor and Lovable. And Emergent is the second Indian AI unicorn in a month, after Sarvam hit the same mark a month earlier. 200,000 paying customers, 70% of whom can't code. That's not a developer tool company. That's a small business software company that happens to write the software itself. Argentina beat England 2-1 in Atlanta last night to reach the World Cup final, and they did it in the last 5 minutes. Anthony Gordon had put England ahead in the 55th minute, and it stayed that way. England 11 minutes from its first World Cup final since 1966, until Lionel Messi set up Enzo Fernandez for a strike from distance in the 85th. Then, in the 93rd, Messi crossed to Lautaro Martinez, who headed it past Jordan Pickford. Those 2 assists give Messi 10 for his World Cup career. That is the all-time tournament record. His 8 goals are tied for the tournament high. Argentina now faces Spain on Sunday, July 19th, at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, defending champions chasing back-to-back titles. Kickoff is 3 p.m. Eastern on Fox and Telemundo. And FIFA has turned the day into something else entirely. Tom Cruise is making an appearance. Jennifer Hudson sings the anthem. The halftime show is 11 minutes, curated by Chris Martin of Coldplay, featuring Shakira, Madonna, BTS, and Justin Bieber, an 11-minute halftime show at a soccer match. This tournament has been in America for a month, and it has picked up the local accent. In British Columbia, LNG Canada has given 5 First Nations an option to invest up to $1 billion Canadian dollars, about $711 million US, in the second phase of its Kitimat project. It would be one of the largest Indigenous ownership positions in any major Canadian infrastructure project. The structure is the clever part. The 5 nations hold their interest through a partnership called MNT Investments, which could buy a majority stake in an entity that would own a storage tank built as part of the expansion. That tank then gets leased back to LNG Canada for as long as the plant operates, which means the revenue is rent, not resource income. Partnership President Aaron Sinclair said the important feature is recurring revenue not exposed to commodity prices. Gas can crash, and the tank still gets leased. Haisla First Nation Chief Counselor Maureen Nice called it a defining point in her nation's 15-year relationship with the project. For scale, LNG Canada is Shell Canada alongside 4 Asian companies. Phase 2 would roughly double planned output, up to 30 million tons a year. A final investment decision is due by year-end. And quickly, before we go, following the $53 billion bid we covered yesterday, PayPal shares jumped 17% Wednesday, and PayPal itself still has not formally responded. One analyst called the bid a lowball, and the piece Stripe may actually want is Venmo, which PayPal bought in 2013 and which processed an estimated $300 billion in payments last year. NASA astronaut Anil Menon and Russian cosmonauts Pyotr Dubrov and Anna Kikina launched from Baikonur Tuesday morning and docked with the International Space Station 3 hours later for an 8-month stay. Menon is a former SpaceX flight surgeon on his first flight. His wife Anna flew to space in 2024 on a Crew Dragon flight chartered by Jared Isaacman and was selected for the Astronaut Corps herself in 2025. Isaacman, now NASA administrator, attended the launch. It was the first visit to Baikonur by a NASA chief in 8 years. George Lucas told A Rabbit's Foot that artificial intelligence makes it much easier to make movies, and that rejecting it is like rejecting cars in favor of the horse and buggy. There's nothing you can do about it, he said. Christopher Nolan recently praised younger audiences for what he called the rejection of AI slop. And Kane Parsons, the 21-year-old director of Backrooms, called AI genuinely harmful to creativity and a symptom of cultural and economic rot. Lucas had a second opinion that got less attention. He said Hollywood gives fans too much power through focus groups and test screenings, and that studios let the audience actually make the movie. The man who invented the modern blockbuster, telling you the audience shouldn't be in charge. And finally, The Batman Part 2 has been delayed again to February 18th, 2028. Director Matt Reeves announced it Wednesday. Let's walk the schedule. Originally October 2025, then October 2026, then October 2027, now February 2028, nearly 6 years after the first film opened. Deadline blames a cascade of shifting release dates at Warner Brothers, as the studio's sale to Paramount takes longer than anyone expected. Reeves softened it with 35 seconds of camera test footage, Robert Pattinson turning slowly to the camera while snow falls around him. DC Studios co-chief James Gunn has defended the gap before, noting on Threads that 7 years passed between Alien and Aliens and 14 between Incredibles films. True. Although in fairness to Pixar, nobody was waiting on a merger to close. And that's the news for Thursday, July 16th. New York became the first state to tell AI data centers to stop building, and the argument that finally worked wasn't about safety. It was about the electric bill. China's economy grew at its slowest pace in 3 years, while its exports surged 27%, and the United States and Iran traded strikes for a 5th day. We'll be watching whether another governor picks up New York's playbook and Argentina against Spain on Sunday. Thanks, as always, for spending part of your morning with us. Take care of yourselves out there. That was KnowFlo Daily. Sign up for your personalized newsletter at knowflo.io. News picked for you, your local news included, free.